cheat sheet.
That is the
Yeah, so
cheat.
you're just going to ask you.
No, we're doing the quiz at the end. We're doing the quiz at the end so that way you can cram and be ready.
Did we take the quiz home?
No.
That was a good idea.
Open book, yes. Open to the book of John. That's about it. All right, so Exodus chapter 34, please. Here's a pretty good way to, increase and ensure engagement in Bible class on the quizzes. If you fail the test, you have to sit in a different pew than your normal spot. For some people, that might be all the motivation that you'll need.
Yeah, your survey at the end of the year is
Yeah, it's getting a little dicey. Very good.
It's changed. It's not forever. It's changed.
And you're being stupid.
Oh, I'm
Yeah, wait till you get there, you're gonna be.
Yeah, I just modeled what I had learned in seminary from my professors, so.
Yeah, I can get on.
Well, it's not too bad. I don't make you read things with footnotes and then quiz you only on the footnotes. That's, one professor was pretty notorious for that. So Exodus chapter 34.
I noticed, Steve, I noticed the young guys are driving toward you.
Sorry, I needed to grab the elixir of life.
So, you see me off the grid, that's the pain, the pain.
All right, Exodus 34. Could I get a volunteer to read verses 1 through 9? Could I get a volunteer to read Exodus 34? Perfect, thank you.
The Lord said to Moses, "Go out and come to the and I will write on them the words that were on the first tablet, which you wrote. Be ready in the morning and then come up to Mount Sinai. Present yourself to me there on top of the mountain. No one is to come with you or be seen anywhere on the mountain, not even the flocks and herds that graze in front of the mountain." So Moses chiseled out 2 stone tablets like the first ones and went up to Mount Sinai early in the morning, as the Lord had commanded him. And he carried the 2 stone tablets in his hand. Then the Lord came down in the cloud and stood there with him and heard him saying, "The Lord." And he passed in front of Moses, proclaiming, the Lord, the compassionate, the gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands, and forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin. Yet he does not leave the guilty unatoned. He punishes the children and their children for the sin of the fathers to the 3rd and 4th generations. Moses bowed to the ground at once and worshipped. "O Lord, if I have found favor in your eyes," he said, "then let the Lord go with us. Although this is a stiff-necked people, forgive our wickedness and our sin, and take us as your inheritance."
All right. So, one of the most important concepts that we see, I think, in Scripture, that certainly is here in the Exodus, that anticipates, that anticipates what happens on Good Friday. Is the idea of the eucatastrophe. So let me write that up here. It's an important word to know and to remember, and plus you can impress all of your family and friends at future gatherings by throwing around casual multisyllabic vocatives towards the people at the table there. So eucatastrophe, what that word means is it's a good turn of events out of disaster.
Can you give an example of that?
Yes. EU, then catastrophe. So EU, and so the prefix here, "u," is from the Greek meaning good. And then catastrophe is catastrophe. So it's a good catastrophe. So the chief example of this, in the genesis for the conception of this word and this idea in theology, is Good Friday, where we have a good catastrophe. Because what happens on Good Friday? The light of the world is seemingly extinguished. Yahweh in the flesh is laid in the ground. God dies. That is, by any stretch of the imagination, a catastrophe. But it is a good catastrophe because out of Christ's death comes his resurrection from the dead, forgiveness of sins, and life in his name. An example in literature from the person who actually helped coin the idea and phrase is when Frodo has his finger bitten off, and Gollum takes the ring and then falls into the cracks of doom. That is a catastrophe, because at the very end, Frodo was too weak to actually willingly give up the ring. And that is a catastrophe, because that's the one chance they had. But it was a good catastrophe in that fate played its part, and the ring eventually was destroyed. And had that not happened, all of the forces of Middle-earth would have been defeated, and everybody would have been broken in body and soul. But instead, we have a good turn of events. But even then, the destruction of the One Ring, which actually we celebrated last week. Anybody know what date the destruction of the One Ring is? Should have had this on the quiz. I'll give you a hint. It also and deliberately shares the same date as a very important day in the church year. Yeah, so we had the Annunciation on the 25th. So that's when the angel Gabriel came and announced to Mary that she was with child. And then what happens 9 months after March 25th? December 25th, Christ being born. So for Tolkien, as a very observant and practicing Roman Catholic, to have the destruction of the One Ring on the same day as the Annunciation is a very deliberate choice he makes, because both of those events are the catalyst by which the great tyrants of the respective worlds are destroyed. You would have known this if you would have read my newsletter article in March, because I'm pretty sure I talked about that.
But you lose me because I've never even seen any of that.
It's all right. Well, you should. I think it's
Put it in farmer's terms.
a good catastrophe. I'm trying to think back to my days in Seward, Nebraska, when I spent 5 years in a town with one stoplight, and the biggest event that happened in a decade was Walmart going from a regular Walmart to a Super Walmart.
Oh, I lived in one of those towns.
Yeah, that was a very big day for all of us, the townsfolk, the college students. Yeah. So let me think of a good eucatastrophe in farmers' terms.
We don't have to now.
I have to. I pride myself on finding ways to have metaphor and analogy. I'm trying to find a good, well, I mean, for the Nebraska farmers, the eucatastrophe is the Nebraska Cornhusker football team going into the fourth quarter with a significant deficit and winning on a last-second field goal. You know, that's an example of the eucatastrophe right there for the Nebraska farmers. But we have a catastrophe, not a eucatastrophe, just a regular old catastrophe in chapter 33. Anybody remember what that is? Well, let's go and refresh ourselves. Actually, that's 33, 32, I should say. This all starts in 32. We have the catastrophe that is the catalyst for the eucatastrophe that we're coming up on and have just seen in Exodus 34. But Exodus 32 is the catastrophe, the initial bad event. And let's just really quickly, could get a volunteer to read 1 through 6 of Exodus 32. 1 through 6, yes, Joan, thank you.
When the people saw that Moses delayed to come down from the mountain, the people gathered themselves together to Aaron and said to him, "Up, make us gods, who shall go before us. As for this Moses, the man who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him." So Aaron said to them, "Take off the rings of gold that are in the ears of your wives, your sons, and your daughters, and bring them to me." So all the people took off the rings of gold that were in their ears and brought them to Aaron. And he received the gold from their hand and fashioned it with a graving tool and made a golden calf. And they said, "These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt." When Aaron saw this, he built an altar before it. And Aaron made a proclamation and said, "Tomorrow shall be a feast to the Lord." And they rose up early the next day, offered burnt offerings, and brought peace offerings. And the people sat down to eat and drink, and rose up to play.
All right, thank you. So what's the catastrophe in chapter 32 here? The making of the golden calf, but what else? What else do we see Aaron do? He built an altar, he said, "These are your gods," and then he also said, "Tomorrow shall be a feast to the Lord." So he built a golden calf. He says these are your gods, but then he still tries to have a faint idea of what piety and faithfulness is, and saying that we're still going to worship Yahweh, but we're also going to worship this golden calf. So he's mingling. It's like if I say tomorrow, all right, we're going to go and we're going to have prayer time for Krishna over at the park. Just down the street on Garrity, after worship today, because this is your God and this is also your God. Obviously, you talk about my end of the year review. That would be a really bad end of year review for me if I was hosting prayer services for other deities in the world's pantheon. We're not, by the way. We're going to have that. Just to be clear. The most we'll do at a park. Do we just, as a bit of an aside, have we had worship outside in the summertime when it's nice? Not lately.
Summertime is not nice.
Too hot.
Sometimes there are services start outside.
Inside. Well, I remember somebody mentioning, but I don't remember who or the context of worship at the park one day. But I don't know if there was construction happening or repairs. I just was curious.
We used to have ice cream socials.
I wouldn't mind that. Obviously, also plug, remember, pickleball for pastors is still going to be a thing for the rest of spring and summer. So be ready. That being said, we have a mingling of faith systems here, both with worship of Yahweh, but also worship of this golden calf, which is really representative of the worship of themselves in a lot of ways, and their own understanding. And that is the genesis of the catastrophe that is Exodus 32. And what happens? Moses returns. He gets so upset, he throws down the 2 tablets of the law, breaks them, and then he takes the golden calf, melts it back, mixes it with water, and has them drink their own riches. But not in a good way. And why would I say not in a good way? Because people pay a lot of money nowadays to put gold leaf on food. It's not, no. And I mean, my brothers and I, we drank gold once. There was a little abandoned mine next to our family cabin that we have up in the Rocky Mountains just outside of Denver, Colorado. And we would pan for gold when we were little, and he would still, it wasn't functioning. And the tiniest of flakes, but we thought, we would get better luck because we were naive and not very smart. That if we drank the water with the gold in it, we would instead of find gold flakes, find gold nuggets. Long story short, we never found gold nuggets, but we did get sick. So,
You're not Joseph Smith, right?
that's right.
I'll find the gold.
But one of the things that we see coming out of this catastrophe is, in a sense, a reversal of the initial miracle that God provides for his people coming out of the Red Sea. What's that first miracle? We have bitter water made sweet. So we see that in Exodus chapter 15. They crossed the Red Sea, Pharaoh's host is swallowed up. Moses has just sung his song of praise, and then they complained that the water doesn't taste good. And so God encourages and tells Moses and Aaron to throw their staff in the water. The bitter water is made sweet. But what's the reversal that happens in Exodus 32? Well, the sweet water is now made bitter once again, because it's mixed with the gold and remnants of all of these idols that the people made in the absence of Moses as he ascended the mountain to receive the work and commandment and law of the Lord on Mount Sinai. So that is the catastrophe that leads to the eucatastrophe in Exodus chapter 34. Any questions or comments on anything in Exodus 32? Bitter water being made sweet. If not, let's turn back to Exodus 34. And we're seeing the beginnings of the eucatastrophe. But let's really quickly read verse 10, and I'll go ahead and do so as we begin in this discussion. Begin to understand who God is, what he has done for us, and who we are in the face of that. And he said, Behold, I am making a covenant before all your people. I will do marvels, such as not been created in all the earth or in any nation. And all the people among you who you are shall see the work of the Lord, for it is an awesome thing that I will do. So, the eucatastrophe is the marvel such as not been created in all the earth or any nation. Anybody want to try to take a guess at what those marvels are, or what that marvel is? What are we in right now? Sunday school. What's the Sunday school answer?
Jesus.
Yes, Jesus. Jesus is the ultimate answer to what we see here in Exodus 34:10. Because the entirety of the covenant that God makes with the people of Israel is bound up in the person of his Messiah, the fulfillment of that covenant, the fulfillment of the promises and work of God. Because the eucatastrophe in Exodus 34 is the eternal nature of God's grace. And really, that's the eucatastrophe, the entirety of the Exodus story. The eucatastrophe of the Exodus is God's eternal grace. And where do we see that? Well, let's read very carefully again, verse 7, and taking note of the nice, at least in the ESV, but I'm assuming other translations have this note as well. So Exodus 34:7, keeping steadfast love for thousands of generations, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin, but who will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers and the children's children to the third and fourth generation. So we have thousands of generations here. Yes?
You already shared with us that that means basically forever.
It is. That means forever. Thousands of generations is the Hebrew idiom for forever. That's how you would communicate the concept of forever in Hebrew. And we see this in stark contrast to the effects of sin, which do last generationally, but is not forever. It's third and fourth. It has a definite endpoint. But the whole point of the steadfast love, being thousands of generations, is the eternal grace of God. So the eucatastrophe coming out of this horrible event from the perspective of the people of Israel, where they create a false god, and not only are they creating a false god, but they are severely disrespecting the work of God, because how did they get that gold and silver and other things to make the idol in the first place? They got it from the people of Egypt as they were leaving the Exodus, as a way for the Lord to have his people have bounty and life and goodness on their way out, so that when they are established as a nation, they will have everything they need to grow and to thrive as a people in the world. And so what do the people of Israel do with that tremendous gift that God provides for them? Melt it all together and make a giant golden calf, rather than preserving it for the good and kindly use of not just for themselves, but for their generations coming after them, for their children and their children's children, as God is going to work through them, through the world. So not only are they creating a false god, but they are actually actively undoing, if you will, the work of God in preparing them and the world for the coming of the Messiah. Because, yeah.
Did they have that gold and silver, or did they steal it from the Egyptians?
No, we see, and we read this earlier when we were going through that. They gave it to them on the way out.
Oh.
Yes.
They looked on them favorably or something like that, right?
Yes. So the people of Egypt gave them gold and silver and other items that they would need on the way out. And
So they wouldn't come back.
Ten plagues would do that to a people. One plague you would think would do that, but yes. So it's clear in the text that was something that the Egyptians gave them on the way out. They didn't steal it necessarily per se. Any other questions or comments? So we have the eternal grace of God, in a sense, be the eucatastrophe, the good catastrophe, the good turn of events out of disaster. And God, being gracious and merciful, is a sharp contrast to the people of Israel, because God was well within his rights to just leave them be in the wilderness. One of the things that we see when it comes to the language of the covenant is the nature of blessings and curses, judgment and grace, law and gospel, if you will. And this is a significant feature, not just in the Exodus, but across the entirety of the Old Testament, building up to the appearance of Christ into the world, is this idea of blessings and curses. And some of that, again, is related to just the nature of Hebrew. Hebrew is a much more clear-cut language. English, you can be very, very vague and say a lot of different things without saying anything definitive. Hebrew is not like that. It's either everything is the greatest thing in the world or everything is the worst thing in the world. And that's really highlighted, even like in the legal language, which a lot of language of the covenant throughout the entirety of the Exodus and across the Torah, the first 5 books of the Old Testament, reflects a lot of legal language we see in documents in the ancient world from the other nations around as well. That's just the nature of the communication of this message. And certainly the people of Israel violate that covenant time and time again, but God is steadfast in his love, which is a reminder, the word that appears the most in Hebrew across the entirety of the Old Testament is chesed, the word for steadfast love. That occurs more than anything else in terms of a singular word, a singular phrase, which again is important to know and to remember. Because the one thing that we never want to do, whether we're thinking about the Exodus or the Old Testament as a whole, is think that Old Testament is law and the New Testament is gospel. Old Testament is judgment, New Testament is grace. There is judgment and grace in the Old Testament, there is judgment and grace in the New Testament. There is law and gospel in the Old Testament, there is law and gospel in the New Testament. And I think, unfortunately, you see a lot of biblical interpretation across almost every denomination, in fact, every denomination, where people do reduce it to that dichotomy. But just as a quick reminder, how does the Ten Commandments begin? How do the Ten Commandments begin? it's not, you shall have no other God before me. It's, I, the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. That's Exodus 20, verse 1. And then following after that, out of that work of God bringing them out of Egypt, then it's the, you shall have no other gods. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, etc. So in a sense, even the giving of the Ten Commandments and the foundation of the law and the covenant that God establishes comes out of His grace and His mercy, because the Exodus is fundamentally a gospel act at the end of the day. But in Exodus 34, we see this clear eucatastrophe, the manifestation of the fullness of the glory of God in the face of Moses. God passes by him and proclaims His name, Yahweh, Yahweh, a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love. And as we are reminded of the nature of Yahweh, what does the name of God mean? How does He explain it to Moses initially back in Exodus chapter 3? I am who I am. Tell the people of Israel that I am has sent me to you. So basically being, He is. And this is kind of going back quite a ways, but what's the connection between the name of God in Exodus and following to Genesis chapter 1? So if the name of God in Hebrew, and I'm just using the transliteration here, is Yahweh, so that's God's name. In Genesis 1, I'll use the English, I'll use the English transliteration. So, the name of Yahweh, I am who I am. And then in Genesis 1, the word in Hebrew, Yahi, let there be light, let there be sun, moon, and stars, let there be creeping things that creep all along the face of the earth. So the source of the Yahi is Yahweh Himself. And then that connects and leads us into how Christ describes Himself in the New Testament. In a variety of places, but especially in the Gospel of John, where we have the great I am statements, which He is saying outright He is Yahweh. And those great I am statements and phrases are things like I am the bread of life, I am the good shepherd, but also before Abraham was, I am, John 8:58. So Jesus is connecting Himself and saying that He is Yahweh, the one who by power and virtue of His word alone has the let there be the genesis of the universe. And that's where Paul later on says that the universe is upheld by the word of His power. Let there be light, let there be darkness, let there be marvels that I am doing, such as never been created in earth or in any nation, etc. So we're seeing throughout the revelation of who God is to His people of Israel, how Christ will be and appear and save the world, and why Jesus eventually does what He does. Any questions or comments on this? All of this is building towards, again, that eucatastrophe, the good turn of events in the face of catastrophe. We're coming out of this grave sin that the people of Israel engage in, and the grave consequences of that sin. You have the reaffirmation of the covenant. You have the reaffirmation of who God is, a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love for thousands of generations. And the way in which God will continue and renew His covenant with the people of Israel, and indeed with the world. Because the reason why it is important to make a covenant with Israel is so that the world may be saved through the Messiah that comes out of the people of Israel. Questions or comments on that? All this is really critical to understand why the Exodus is important, not just in the context of the time of Moses, but how it builds and anticipates the person and work of Christ. As we continue on, let's just take a brief look at some of the things that I have just mentioned there. So let's actually turn to the Gospel of John. So John chapter 8. So John 8, starting in verse 48. And then could I get a volunteer to read 48 through the end of the chapter? All right, thank you.
Then the Jews answered and said to him, "Do we not say rightly that you are a Samaritan and have a demon?" Jesus answered, "I do not have a demon, but I honor my Father, and you dishonor me. And I do not seek my own glory. There is one who seeks and judges. Most assuredly I say to you, if anyone keeps my word, he shall never see death." Then the Jews said to him, "Now we know that you have a demon. Abraham is dead, and the prophets, and you say, if anyone keeps my word, he shall never taste death. Are you greater than our father Abraham, who is dead, and the prophets are dead? Who do you make yourself out to be?" Jesus answered, "If I honor myself, my honor is nothing. It is my Father who honors me, of whom you say that he is your God. Yet you have not known him, but I know him. And if I say, I do not know him, I shall be a liar like you. But I do know him and keep his word. Your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day, and he saw it and was glad." Then the Jews said to him, "You are not yet 50 years old, and you have seen Abraham?" Jesus said to them, "Most assuredly I say to you, before Abraham was, I am." Then they took up stones to throw at him, but Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple, going through the midst of them, and so passed by.
All right, so we have a lot of interesting things that are going on here. And as I mentioned, 8:58, so when it says, before Abraham was, I am. In Greek, there's essentially only one way to talk about Yahweh. And there are two different words to talk about being in Greek. You have the verb eimi, and then you have the verb ego, or ego. And when they appear together, that is an emphatic. A lot of times when you see two words that have similar meanings in Greek, when they appear together, it's an emphatic way to say something. But the interesting thing is, outside of Jesus referring to himself as the I am, Yahweh, you never see ego and eimi together in Scripture like that. And you don't even really see it a lot in Koine or Classic Greek, for that matter. It's really at all. It only occurs in the New Testament in the Septuagint, which is a translation, the Greek translation of the Hebrew Old Testament. And so there are 7 times when Jesus has an I am statement like this, before Abraham was, I am. And then there are 7 of those theological declarations that Jesus makes, like I am the Good Shepherd in the Gospel of John. But here, why does he end with the confession that he does? Well, with the question they ask in verse 48. Did anybody catch how they asked this question in 48?